Episode 0, the default battle dress of Warden and Colonial soldiers. We'll start this off with a brief game history lesson. Prior to 2017, Clackfoot, now known presently as Siege Camp, used a series of asset and placeholder models to represent the soldiers of both factions for the game, with the only difference of course being the colour. This changed in 2017, and along with many other changes to Foxhole that year was the introduction of each faction having their own unique appearance. Teased and experimented in multiple examples of concept art and experimental renders, the character of the Colonial and Warden armies emerged, a more unified and professional vision of the previous alpha concept art of both sides resembling post-apocalyptic resistance fighters. With the arrival of world conquest came the distinct themes both sides have. It is generally accepted that the appearance of both armies of Foxhole clearly take inspiration from two real-world armies that fought in major 20th century conflicts. The Second World War era US Army and the French soldiers of the Third Republic of the First World War. However, Foxhole being fantasy, there is no hard set limit to what the game's artists can draw and take inspiration from when using the past of our real world, keeping both the style and theme to ensure immersion in the game's world for the player. Focusing both on what is practical to wear and to avoid styles tainted by negative association or just something that would not be practical on the battlefield or in the barracks or an actual serving soldier. You can easily find examples of this in other genres in entertainment today. Thankfully, the development team of the game and artists are very much aware of this pitfall and should be praised for the work they've done so far with both the concept art and the renders. Now let's get straight into the content of the video, the uniforms themselves. I'll be starting from the top down and working to the bottom with each subject example. The default Warden battle dress. Helmet. The main inspiration for the headgear of the Wardens is essentially the well-known French Tldr helmet that was used in both World Wars. From the coxcomb on the crown to the dedicated section for a regimental or national badge or crest to be fixed upon the front. This shrapnel helmet, designed mainly to protect the head and shoulders from wounds with the debris thrown up by explosions, actually has more than just a single obvious source for inspiration. The circular brim of the helmet also seems in line with the Brodie-style helmets issued to the British, US and Commonwealth forces in both World Wars. Oddly enough, with the case, both helmets neither appear to have straps to secure them to the head. I assume they exist, but they're not rendered due to the in-game camera angle. Overcoat. The double-breasted horizon blue style overcoat the Warden forces used seem to have been inspired by several early 20th century European greatcoat designs which were worn in temperate conditions during sentry duties or night patrol and would be standard issue to most fighting forces in these conflicts. The real-world inspirations to this coat are in fact two different coats. It is a combination of the P-07/10 tunic overcoat of the Great War Imperial German Army and the French M1915 capote. Older French-style greatcoats have also been alluded to in Foxhole lore and in fan and based art made by the community. The Warden coat has several interesting fictional features that allude to their mainline real-world source, including the marker tabs on the sleeves which were used both in the overcoats themselves and no doubt in the tunics perhaps worn underneath like in this real-world example. For some reason, fan artists choose to use the British First World War greyback shirt with trouser braces, but in my opinion this would fit the Colonial side more than the Warden. In general, with the present battle dress and future Warden uniforms, we cannot deny the French Republic forces being the strongest influence, as you can see in this image demonstrating the transition and development of the French soldiers' uniform in the First World War. An additional note, the provided renders show the buttons to be shiny for the Warden coat. This is a disturbing choice to make, as you'd think a defensive faction that pioneered trench warfare should know that light would scratch the reflective metal, and really at this point exposed metal should be painted or just pewter used in its place. Ammo and equipment system. Now I'll be covering the equipment carry system the Warden army is using. At the dawn of the 20th century, leather was the traditional choice for these equipment harnesses with our world, and it is the same with the Wardens in Foxhole. The leather belts and straps are used to help the soldier bear the burden of the weight and what they will need to fight and live with on the front line during the campaign. The belts and rifle cartridge boxes are all made of brown leather and exactly match the real-world Lebel rifle-focused 8mm boxes used by the French army during the Great War, even down to the way of closing them shut with the stud and tab. We will also be mentioning the packs that were worn until the developers removed them from the basic battle dress to another uniform in the coming update. The Warden pack, which players of both factions should instantly know quite well, is based on the real-world box-shaped M1893 knapsack. The removal does make sense from a world-building point of view. These packs or knapsacks were never worn in full order in the planned combat due to the additional weight it would force itself on the soldier and the awkwardness of moving with it on. they were with the other possessions of the soldier, where they were garrisoned behind the front line in safety. Warden trousers are an oddity. Usually modern battle dress conforms to some form of matching symmetry, and the trousers should match the upper body, or the clashing of two colours cancels out the environmental blending. Warden trousers, instead of being grey or blue, are instead a darker than brown. Due to the skirt length of the overcoats they wear, we do not know if they have pockets. Now, the choice of brown is not a bad one, as it at least can blend into the background of certain terrain types, assuming the northern areas of the map the snow does fall and parts of Warden territory in the north are temperate. Things like this are not too bad. Though, if the Wardens have a tunic or shirt underneath, does it match the greatcoat or their trousers? A question to really ponder on. Boots. This will perhaps be the shortest bit to cover, as the issued footwear for this and the new uniforms due to either time or engine constraints are limited. Both the Warden and Colonial forces seem to be wearing military ankle boots with long canvas gaiters for support and protection of their feet. Looking at all the present and coming uniforms, there does not seem to be any sort of standardized issued pair of boots or gaiters, as they seem to be made from different kinds of leather. This is true to real life, as with the production of army uniforms and equipment, multiple factories and firms are chosen and used, and sometimes shortages force them to use different sources or substitutions for the materials. Allegedly, both sides could be using and recycling each other's older boots due to the conditions of the extended conflict. The Colonial default battle dress. Helmet. Like the Warden helmet, the Colonial helmet actually has two inspirations to its design, not just one. While due to the isometric camera height of the game and soldier model size, it is hard to exactly see the profile of the Colonial helmet, but the brim flares out around the whole helmet's outer shell edge. This is different to the US Army's M1 helmet, where the outer shell brim just flares out from the front and back, so the other real-world parent to the Colonial helmet shell could possibly be the Soviet Union's own SH-40, which was one in a series of lower head protecting shrapnel helmets the Soviet Union equipped during the Second World War. Jacket. Unlike the Wardens, the Colonials reside in a sunnier climate, so instead of the overcoats they are using combat jackets with their uniforms design. Now, this jacket is interesting, as what we have here is a combination of two different armies and eras. The jacket shape and cut itself resembles the M1941 jacket the US Army GI would be wearing, but the features of the coat and the pockets and collar resemble more of the 1902 British Army tunic. Another element of interest with the Colonial uniform is the cape-like mantle worn casually on the top of this jacket. Allegedly it is ceremonial. This I disagree with, as with everything else we've seen on the Colonial uniform, it has practical frontline combat in mind. I personally think this item is actually part of some sort of mild weather poncho or cape system that is either compacted and pinned up or is just one of two parts, the other part being left in the rucksack to be used in bad weather. Ammo and equipment system. Colonial forces do things certainly different from the Wardens. Instead of using leather, they've adapted a more modern solution with their load-bearing system, using cotton for their straps and ammo pouches. Both the US, British and Commonwealth forces would be using these in real life, with the relevant example that matches in the game example being the British Army 1937 pattern webbing. Interestingly though, instead of press studs, for some reason the pouches the Colonials seem to be using are buckles. And on a final note, we'll mention the MIA backpack from this uniform, which looks like a cross between the 1937 pattern haversack made to a more modern Bergen style kit rucksack with the side pockets. Legwear. Now the dark trousers for the Colonial battle dress are interesting, as they have two long pockets on the outer thighs. It shows that unlike the Wardens, who are more traditional or lacking the materials to modernise the uniforms, the Colonial command structure seems to be more open to the ideas of experimenting with the uniforms to give them the edge. During the Second World War, most nations that fought in the previous conflict developed battle dress cargo trousers with these kind of pockets to help with the carrying of light or loose items or documentation for easier access. The real-world example being, of course, the 1937 British Army battle dress trousers shown here. Footwear. Sadly, I have covered this previously with the Warden uniforms, and unless in the future more uniforms have variety, we won't be covering what is worn on the feet at all after this point. General conclusion. Obviously, I really like these uniforms, and they fit very well the in-game world lore and aesthetics. The only flaws I see with them is the leg and boot situation, which I can understand is not a major focus, as you'll only be seeing your legs and feet moving or on the ground dead or dying in-game. If the game's artists ever decide to improve on either uniform, I can only ask for really two things. 1. Consider giving either side putties above the boots instead of using ankle gaiters. And 2. Position the cold weather cape poncho thing over both the soldiers of the colonial soldier, so it gives the illusion it can at least cover mostly torso of a fighting adult. I'll be covering each faction's cold weather uniforms next, if the reception of the video is decent. Until then, keep fighting and walk on the side of the road too. Thank you for listening.